Welcome to Living Well with MS. This show comes to you from Overcoming MS, the world's leading multiple sclerosis healthy lifestyle charity, which helps people live a full and healthy life through the Overcoming MS program. We interview a range of experts and people with multiple sclerosis. Please remember, all opinions expressed are their own. Living Well with MS is listener supported. If you'd like to support us and help keep our show advertiser free, donate online at overcomingms.org/donate. And now, let's meet our guest.
Welcome to the latest edition of Living Well with MS. Joining me on this edition is a very special guest, and we have Alex Holden. Alex is the new CEO of Overcoming MS, having joined in the role in March 2023. And so we're going to get some insights into Alex, her background, what's happening with Overcoming MS, what's been happening in the last 6 months or so, and where it might be going in the future. So thank you very much for joining us, and welcome to the podcast, Alex.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
So to start off with, I think a lot of people will be unfamiliar with you. So could you tell us a bit about your background, your expertise in the charity sector, and how did you become CEO of Overcoming MS?
Well, in terms of my background, I've spent the last 11 years at an ovarian cancer charity in the UK called Target Ovarian Cancer. And although, yes, ovarian cancer is a very different condition to MS, there's a surprising number of overlaps actually in terms of particularly how we deal with the health sector and the importance of charities engaging with healthcare professionals, difficulties around diagnosis, difficulties around people getting the right support. So there's an awful lot of transferable things that are coming that's been really interesting actually learning more about them, how that impacts on people with MS. Previously to ovarian cancer, a whole mishmash of things from learning disability, financial services. I've worked at Bupa, and I started out a long time ago as a teenager. Actually, I worked several years all through sort of school and university in a care home. And I suppose that's particularly relevant because I think that's that sort of developed the value base of really thinking about everybody needs respect, no matter what struggles they have, no matter what they've gone through, and just really understanding people's situations are so individual to them. And I think that's really sort of shaped then where I've gone with the rest of my career, even though it was a very long time ago, as I say.
And I think there is a connection. You're saying connections. I think the more I learn about it, the more autoimmune conditions have a lot of overlap between each other. It's like, why is our body attacking itself? Because we didn't catch MS, and yes, there's sort of maybe we had Epstein-Barr virus in the past, but essentially something that's caused our bodies to do something. And similarly, it does in whether it be Parkinson's, be cancer, be all these other things, that your body for some reason is doing something wrong and attacking itself. So there does seem to be a lot of overlap between those sort of things.
And the huge development of drugs and the advances in research as well on how you can then use drugs to stop your body or to actually enhance how your body attacks itself in order to attack the disease condition as well. It's really, really interesting. And I think the repurposing of common drugs that's going on at the moment is really fascinating as well.
Well, so I've had Lemtrada or alemtuzumab, which is a repurposed cancer drug. So there's a lot of it goes on, yeah. So it's,
huge opportunities.
They find, your immune system doing something wrong. They repurpose one thing that attacks your immune system, use something else. So I'm guessing you know all about the sort of 7 pillars, the pillars of the OMS program. So as someone who's come from outside, what do you think? Is there a pillar there that you think actually, that really resonates? And have you actually taken on board any of the pillars? Have you started to follow some of the OMS program?
It's hard not to get caught up in it when everybody's talking about lifestyle all the time. So it's hard not to start getting really into it. I think I've always been very interested in nutrition. And I did at one point really consider training as a nutritional therapist. So that's something that I'm really passionate about, the importance of diet and how that contributes to your well-being rather than taking things out of your diet, sort of how you look at what's contributing to energy and things like that. I think it's really interesting. Physical activity, I know I'm not as good as I should be, but I'm also a very busy person with 2 children, so I think there's quite a lot of just sheer nervous energy and running around. And then, sorry, my computer just flashed there. And then in terms of, I'm not very good at stress management, which I know from having spoken to lots of people that that's the one that lots of people struggle with. I have done a couple of Phil sessions on meditation to try and get better at that. But then there's, I like the fact that talking about stress management rather than just meditation, being able to go for a walk in the countryside,
Exactly, yeah.
being able to do some gardening, I'm getting a lot better at that.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely it. Yeah, and that's why it's not referred to as meditation, because or it can be. You can have a mindful gardening session. You can have a mindful swim in a swimming pool. You can live life mindfully in many ways without actually sitting down and having a dedicated half an hour.
I did. I went on a first time. I do like swimming, actually. You mentioned that, and I went for the first time on a swimming holiday this summer. Which, for those who are able and who are into swimming, I cannot recommend enough for both the physical aspects, but actually for the mental aspects as well, of just swimming around different Greek islands each day.
I was going to say, was it in Greece? I know somebody's done it. Yeah, so
between
you go
3
from place
and 5
to place.
kilometres every day, which I never thought I'd be able to do. So I was so proud of myself, but also you're literally just sort of swimming for 3 to 5 kilometres and looking at the fish and looking at the coastline around you. So I came back feeling absolutely amazing physically and mentally from that. So yeah, that I suppose would fit a number of the different pillars.
Well, yeah, if you are anything like that, it's in the moment.
Yeah.
So I had a background where I did a lot of adventure sports, so I was sort of surfing and rock climbing, things like that. If you're rock climbing, you're always in the moment. Well, if you're not,
rock climbing scares me. Swimming, I came home feeling like Superwoman. Rock climbing would scare me.
You definitely focus on what you're doing.
Yes.
So the community side of it. So there is now a huge Overcoming MS community, and there's sort of organised parts of that with the hub and so on. But what are your impressions of Overcoming MS as a community, and have you met many of the Overcoming MS members? Do you now that COVID's over, are you actually getting to meet people?
Yes, and we've been really fortunate this year that we've been managing to run more face-to-face events, and I've met a lot of people on Teams as well at different events. I've met a number of the ambassadors on different calls, and I've had calls with quite a few individuals. I mean, the Overcoming MS community is just amazing. You know that you're a key member of it. And going back to your first question, it's one of the main reasons that I really, really wanted the job. I kind of applied for the job as one does, of just sort of, you read the job description. And then the more that I met people and the more that I spoke to people, I just got really passionate about the people that I was starting to get to know through the various interviews that you go through, and sort of the background research and reading people's stories and seeing the chat that goes on social media. I just felt I was getting more and more drawn into it. It is such a strong community and a very giving community, I think, is my impression of people who have had some really quite devastating news and are managing to give each other so many levels of support and tips and positivity and hope, and to be part of that community and those sorts of people who have that mindset. I feel very, very fortunate. And as an organisation, we're really, really small. We are absolutely dependent on people like you, people who are in our circles, people who are our ambassadors, people going out there fundraising for us, every single thing. There's only 12 staff members and most of us are part-time. The only way we can support a global community is through the community themselves. So you can tell, sorry, I'm blabbing on because I'm really passionate.
Well, no, I was going to say,
have just been amazing.
So 2 things I was going to say. One is, I said, now that we're over COVID, I know COVID's not over. Someone sort of flagged that. It's not actually over. It's just not as bad as it was. But also, this is sort of off topic on what we were going to talk about, but the charitable side of it, I mean, I just think I did a skydive. It was brilliant. I mean, to be honest, people were giving money to overcoming MS, and I had a great time. I instead of rock climbing, so I'm into adventure sports and adrenaline
Yeah.
stuff. So the fact that I got to jump out of a plane and overcoming MS got a load of money. It's brilliant. And
Yeah.
there's all sorts of things you can do, and you can do it. You know, when people just think like, I really don't know what I want for my birthday because there really is nothing. And so my wife did one. She did it for her birthday and just said, look, what I want for my birthday is for you to donate money to overcoming MS. And actually people are very generous. And so there's a lot you can do. And there was sort of an abseil off the orbit tower.
We did.
Thing.
I was just about to say we did our first abseil off the metal tower in the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park in East London, which was for Linda Bloom's birthday. So Linda and Tony Bloom, that was what she wanted for her to celebrate her 50th birthday.
I was away for that. I wish I could have got involved because I actually support the local football club. So I'm a
oh, okay.
And I've met Tony Bloom and I've chatted to him a lot about football. And
because
he is somewhat involved with another football club. But anyway,
he is a little involved in another football club. Linda absolutely loved it. Tony was terrified. I think there was maybe 13 people who did it. It raised a huge amount of money. But again, the thing that was really interesting was I met Claire, who's an ambassador for the Essex Circle, who'd bothered to come up and watch the team abseiling because she really cared and she just wanted to be there to support them. And I just thought, brilliant. I mean, how amazing is that somebody felt that they wanted to come and watch. You've got prick in your neck from having to sit there and watch them coming down the tower. But we will be doing one in 2024. So if people are interested, they can start getting in touch.
And the whole community and the hubs. I mean, the hub that I'm involved in, or the circle that I'm involved in the southwest of England, people at the moment, there's someone's having trouble because their father's gone into a care home and stuff, and it's nothing to do with their MS, but it's just such a supportive group that they've really sort of rallied around, and they're providing support, and equally, physical support if people need it, meeting up, and it might be MS and it might not be MS. Sometimes it's just because they're become a very sort of caring and inclusive group, and it's and it's
people who understand what you're going through that you can rely on, and exactly. It's I think that's also the thing I'm really conscious of with MS as being different to a lot of other conditions, is that when people are diagnosed, you're juggling that and your emotions are being diagnosed. You're juggling with the physicality that caused you to be diagnosed in the first place, but also it's often at a time of life where you've got family, elderly parents, you've got career, you've got social life, all of these things that you're trying to juggle. And I think that's one of the jobs of overcoming MS, is to help people be able to manage that juggle actually by finding ways to get through it, because it's not something I've experienced. My cousin has MS. That's one of the reasons why I was interested in the job, and a very, very good friend has MS. So I have seen sort of what they've gone through, but yeah, it's just trying to get through all of that clutter in people's lives is so difficult. It's hard enough at the best of times.
But you're right. I hadn't really thought about it, because it's not a lot of these conditions will affect geriatric people. If that's a polite term. I'm not sure.
Elderly people.
Elderly people, yes. I was put in the geriatric unit when I had the infusions at the hospital, just because it was neurological and geriatric. So it's I was like, okay, I'm not sure where I'm being classified here, but
I think if you're something like over 30 and pregnant, you're counted as a geriatric mother, which is just wrong. So,
So if people sort of wanted to get to know you a bit more, so what do you get up to outside work anyway? Do you have like hobbies, interests? What do you do?
I have no time for hobbies and interests. I have two teenagers who are really busy. So my job is, my outside of overcoming MS is being a taxi driver, of just driving them around to football matches and all their various different clubs and social occasions and parties. And then I read quite a lot. And so I'll sort of do things around that. But at the moment, I'm quite conscious it's very kid focused and work focused. And if I can squeeze some things in between, then I do. My children do like to get very involved in my work life. They like to know who I'm meeting. They like to join Zoom calls and Teams calls. So at some point, various members of the community will see two not so little ginger people wandering around in the background. One of them came to the abseil when we went to watch that. So people will get to know them over time.
There were some quite notorious COVID era videos, weren't there, of newsreaders where some small person would walk behind.
Yes, yeah. Well, so now they're teenagers. They're generally up in their room and watching TikTok.
Yeah,
with much time to spare. But
having teenagers, it's getting them downstairs is the problem, not the other way
yes,
around.
Exactly.
So we mentioned sort of about since COVID lockdowns and that now there are in-person events. So now there seems to be more like pop-up events, and are they going to continue? Is that something that will carry on?
Yes, so we've done 4 pop-up events this year, which not everyone will have had the opportunity to experience. So we went to 4 places around the UK, just for a couple of hours each time as a social opportunity for people to come to meet each other, and then have a couple of presentations from either people from that local circle, from the local area, or experts in elements of the Overcoming MS programme. We'd like to do more of those and plan to within 2024. I think they've already worked out the locations, but I'm not sure I have permission to drop those into the conversation as yet. And obviously, at the moment they're UK based, and so we're also looking at how we can deliver those either remotely using the Overcoming MS team, but also get to work much more closely with circles and with ambassadors to be able to deliver those types of events in other places than the UK as well, because I think that's really important. We've delivered, 2023 has been a sudden return to so much stuff. So we were talking before we came on the podcast, we've just done our first retreat as well since before the pandemic, which was in November. And that absolutely brilliant to have brought 40 people together face to face to have experienced the retreat. And I think, we'll definitely carry on doing that. But again, looking at how we can make that available to more people, both from a cost point of view and a geography point of view.
And those are are they 4 or 5 days?
Well, so the format's changed, that there's more upfront digitally to take some of the content out, and then the retreats themselves are then 2.5 days, or the one we've just done was a 2.5 day, to try and reduce cost and reduce the time pressures on people, which worked really well actually, because there was a series of sort of the more learning and content focused sessions came up front once a week. For sort of 4 weeks in the run up to the retreat. So then the retreat could be more around the in-person sharing and getting to know each other, which I think was a real benefit.
So another thing, so mentioning online, so we did have circles, we did have a forum, then we had circles, and circles there were a lot of teething troubles, no doubt. And then the big decision was made to change circles and come up with the new system. I think they're often referred to as circles still, as sort of the groups we have, but the system now is the hub. So we now have the Live Well hub. So can you tell us a bit about the Live Well hub, and if people are interested, how do they go about accessing that?
So the Live Well Hub, I'm really excited about the future of the Live Well Hub. Yes, I think we have to admit that Circles Online, so the previous platform to try and engage, to enable Circle members to chat to each other, I think I have not been on it, but from what I gather from the team, was technically not that great.
And the problem is, I think, partly that it's competing with Facebook, WhatsApp, and they have those things. So if it's nowhere near as
and I think the functionality wasn't that great. I think any technology, in order for it to work, has to be easy for people. The joy of the Live Well hub is that it's not just bringing the circles together. So there's a section that everyone can go in and post, and people will either post nice thoughts about something that they've done that they're particularly happy about, because sometimes you need to share with somebody who understands where you're coming from. If you go and tell your next door neighbour, they're not that excited. If you share with someone who's got a similar experience to you, whatever that might be, then you're going to get a different reaction. And then there's the circles themselves. So there's areas where the different circles can come together and have a private area for their conversations. And then we can also do live streams. So we've been doing quite a number of those with Dr. Johnny White's done several of them, where people can then come on and they're more informal than a webinar, much more opportunity for questions and answers. And actually, they were a really great way of people just being able to have a chat there and then. They're recorded so people can come back to them. So that's quite a good way of being able to access content in a much easier, literally in your pocket kind of way, because it is an app that you can download from the App Store or what is it on Google? On Android, it's the Google Play
Store,
yeah.
Yeah.
The Play Store. But you can also access it on the desktop through the website as well. So, that sort of works for different people and different people's needs. But I think it's the potential that it has for, again, bringing people together in different ways. You can come together with your circle, but you can also form a great relationship with people who live at the other end of the country or in a completely different country.
And well, the other thing is, so I hadn't noticed that before actually, but so I'm just been reclassified as secondary progressive. So there's subject based groups as well. So there's a progressive group. So it's not just geographic. So there's more than that. So yeah, it's worth having a look through, because it may be that yes, there'll be one for that you live in Massachusetts, but there'll also be one because you've got progressive MS, and so you can join multiple circles.
And there's the opportunity for all sorts of different circles. Exactly. We could have, if there were enough people and someone who was willing to, we don't moderate it, but you need someone who's going to be passionate and committed and engaged. We could create a knitting one or a bird watching one. These are only silly examples, please don't. But if there's enough people who actually want to do that, we've talked about some ones for different languages as well. Because again, that wouldn't necessarily be geography, because you could have Spanish speaking people from all over the world. But if there is enough of a demand and people who are sufficiently engaged to be in there and posting and bringing people together, again, that's back to where we're really dependent on our volunteers and on our community. But we can provide the base. It's then up to people to come out with some ideas and volunteer to be involved with it.
And I know something that's happening more is that Overcoming MS is reaching out and becoming involved with other organisations. And there's been some sort of alliances on a few different things. And so you went to the ECTRIMS conference this year, which is, or last year. But it's the big European MS, it's where all the neurologists go, it's where all the research talked about, the big conference. And so firstly, what was it? I mean, it's something I'd be interested to go on. But what was it like, and what did you learn about the future of where MS treatments are going?
That's a big question. I think so. For people who don't know, ECTRIMS is the European Congress for Treatment and Research in Multiple Sclerosis, and it was combined with ACTRIMS, which is the American Congress of etc. So
okay, so this was a fully international, right?
It was fully international. There were people from everywhere, and anyone you've ever heard of within the world of MS, mainly in terms of research and treatment. A lot of neurologists were there, a lot of nurses were there, the pharma companies were all there, obviously having presence. It was amazing because I got to meet a lot of people in person that I've either heard of, new into role. I haven't necessarily had meetings with everybody yet, although I do feel I've had an awful lot of meetings. And also actually just being able to, you don't necessarily need a half hour or an hour long Teams call with someone. You just need 5 minutes just to say, hi, I'm Alex, really great to meet you. But there's also if you've not been, it's really hard to explain. There were 9,000 people. Now, some of those were joining digitally, but there was a huge number of people. Every single day, there were possibly, I haven't got the timetable in front of me, but there were possibly sort of 9 columns of different events in different locations. So for each time slot of the day, you probably had 8 or 9 different sessions that you could attend, and you kind of choose the ones that you wanted to go to that you thought would be the most interesting. But within each of those sessions, there might be 4 or 5 different presentations. And within all of those, you're then trying to arrange to meet up with key people. We have a really close partnership with the University of Melbourne, and there was the head of the neuroepidemiology unit there was over, and I really wanted to meet her because I've talked lots to her on Teams, but I wanted to meet her in person. But you kind of almost have to choose: do I go to a session, or do I have a really important conversation, and do you a lot of that really awful walk with me, and you kind of end up having a walking conversation. In terms of the main pieces of research coming out of it, the theme of the event was smouldering MS. There was lots about Epstein-Barr. There was actually quite a lot of conversation about healthy lifestyle. And I'm going to dodge it entirely and say that there is a webinar with Brett Drummond, who's talking through, which I'm also on, talking through the key outcomes from ECTRIMS. So he kind of was going through the key pieces of research. But it was fascinating, utterly overwhelming, but really, really interesting.
And it is moving forward. There's more to come because there's been a lot in the last 5 years, but it's carrying on, I believe.
The volume and the speed of research, and actually, as with all research in all diseases, there's not enough investment, there's not enough resources, but there is progress being made. People who've done research projects can present a poster at these types of conferences to demonstrate their results and to sort of get people interested in either taking that research forward or thinking about how the results could be useful in their own work. There was over 1,000 different posters being presented, and that really illustrates the volume of work going on. Now, some of those will be really early stage trials, but and desk-based research, but equally a lot of that will be stuff that will genuinely go on to change people's lives. So I think that's really interesting.
And so this sounds a little bit like a job interview question, but where would you see overcoming MS going in the future, in the next 5 years, 10 years? Where do you see changes in the organisation?
I see. Well, it's a well-timed question. We've just finalised our business plan for 2024 to 2026. Which we've presented to the board, and they're all very engaged and happy with that. I think we've sort of got some key priorities of what we feel is really important, and a lot of that is being influenced and driven by the community and the surveys that we do. So when we're really annoying and send out those emails saying, please give us your thoughts, we genuinely take the input from those and then help determine our plans for going forward from that. So I think reach is really important, particularly post-pandemic, and that balance that we've already talked about in-person versus virtual, how we get to people, the harder to reach, harder to listen to groups, different geographies, different languages. There's a lot of people out. We have a huge community and it's amazing, but there's often a lot of people we're missing. And the number of people who I speak to who didn't come across overcoming MS until much later after their diagnosis, and that sort of, I wish I'd come across you 3 years ago. So we're really prioritising some work with healthcare professionals to engage with how we can get to people quicker, but also how healthcare services, not just the NHS in the UK, but actually globally, healthcare services are in crisis. And we as an organisation can actually help by taking some of the pressure off the nurses and the healthcare professionals themselves by saying, no, that's fine, here's a whole load of resources for you. That actually makes people's jobs easier. So that's a priority for us. I think getting more involved in treatment and research around healthy lifestyle and doing more and more to provide our community the tools to be able to talk to people about why they're following the programme, the tools to be able to talk to healthcare professionals about why they're following the programme, and building on that evidence base. As I said, building more with our volunteers and our communities to be able to, again, that's the bit, I suppose it links to the reach, doesn't it? But that's the bit that helps us get to more people because we are a small organisation. And then we've invested in a fundraising team. And so doing more around our fundraising and our income to give us that sustainability for our future and to know that, we know we've got certain levels of income coming in year, which makes it easier to plan, which is terribly boring and terribly basic. But if we don't get those fundamentals in place and get that fundraising right, we can't be planning for 2 or 3 years ahead because we don't know what money we're going to have for 2 or 3 years ahead. So sort of starting up, we've started doing some work around legacies and people leaving gifts in their will, which, you know, is years in the future, but that's what we need to be planning that far ahead in order to give us that security for the future and long-term planning.
Yeah, and I would just to reiterate on the charity, because I think there's a Just Giving time, isn't there, coming up, which is probably before this will probably release after that's happened, but it's always worthwhile. You know, if you feel that Overcoming MS has given you a lot, and I mean, I personally just think I wasn't spending any money with Overcoming MS, but I'd got, you know, loads of resources from them and loads of support from them, and that's provided by charities. So if it's something that doesn't actually cost you any money, you can do it as a birthday present or as an event and go and do something scary, and people will pay you money to do. Your friends like to see you do scary things. So yeah,
I'm keen on a tagline of overcoming your fears, because then that goes with overcoming MS.
Yeah,
but I haven't quite got the team excited.
No, I like that. I think that's good. Overcoming your fears. Yeah, no, it's good. But yeah, it is always so people who are like heavily involved getting benefit, they think they're getting benefit. I really would encourage, and you feel good about it as well. You know, when
I think
money
that's
being
true.
given, I'm like, and I actually didn't do gravity did the work for me when I jumped out of a plane. I didn't really have much to do at all.
But as you say, you know, actually, I think a lot of people don't know we're a charity. You can go and buy George Denelick's book, and it's amazing, and he's amazing. What we do as a charity is then bring that to life and help people, because not everyone can digest an entire book in that way. So it's, you know, things like the podcast, the webinars, all of that.
And there's loads of leaflets that you can get, and
it makes it more practical, the recipe suggestions. And you don't need to pay for it. That is not where we would want to go to, that people have to pay for it, because the whole point is that we're giving support to anybody who needs it, no matter what their income is. And so that won't change, although we may end up, you know, so you already would pay for retreats anyway, but the majority of our content will remain open to everybody.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much for speaking to me, and a massive thank you to you, Geoff, for all the work you've been doing for years on the podcast, because it's absolutely amazing, and I know the number of people listening to it is huge. So a huge, enormous thank you from all of us at Overcoming MS too.
Well, thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Living Well with MS. Please check out this episode's show notes at overcomingms.org/podcast. You'll find useful links and bonus information there. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode, and please rate and review the show to help others find us. This show is made possible by the Overcoming MS community. Our theme music is by Claire and Nav Dean. Our host is Jeff Alex. Our videos are edited by Lorna Greenwood, and I'm the producer, Regina Beach. Have questions or ideas to share? Email us at podcast@overcomingms.org. We'd love to hear from you. The Living Well with MS podcast is for private, non-commercial use and exists to educate and inspire our community of listeners. We do not offer medical advice. For medical advice, please contact your doctor or other licensed healthcare professional.